So in this video, we're just going to go over some of the things that don't really fit with either of the reader classes that we talked about, but are still kind of important to know and make sure you understand. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is paths. So there's some important things about paths that you should know. The first of which is what an absolute or a full path is, and hopefully you know what these things are already. But an absolute or full path is basically the whole path to the file. Whole, ooh, whole path to file. So if I have something in my desktop, for example, and I'm on a Unix system, this is going to look a little bit different for you people on a Windows. But if you're on a Unix system, it would be something like slash, which stands for root, users, and then it's going to be my username without the brackets, just my username. And it's going to be like if I have that output file on my desktop, it's just going to be out.txt. And that's going to take me essentially to that's actually going to take me to my home directory, not my desktop, my home directory on a Unix system. For a Windows user, it's going to look a little bit different. You're going to have like a C, and you're going to have backslashes, and you're going to have, I think you actually still have the users, and you still have the username, right? And you're going to have basically a very similar path, but it's going to be a little bit different. And I don't think I have the syntax quite right for the Windows. So again, this is Unix, and this is Windows. All right. So that's basically what an absolute path is. It's the full path to the file. And the reason why that's important is because there's something else called a relative path. A relative path is basically the path to the file from where I am currently. So if I'm already in my desktop or wherever I want to be, this could just be out.txt, and this is the same for both Windows and for Unix in this case. And in the next case, let's say that it's up one folder and then maybe down another set. On Unix, this is going to be 2 dots a slash the new folder name. So let's just say this is new for whatever reason, and this is out.txt is the file that we're looking for. Again, that's Unix. Windows is going to look a little bit different, but generally the same idea. So I'm not really going to cover that. But it's going to look something like this. It's really important that you understand these paths because when you're inputting file names into your program, you have to understand where your program is running to understand where it's going to be reading those files from. So understanding the absolute and full paths is important there. And then it also depends on your operating system style. So another thing that's important for talking about full paths in particular is that, like I said before, so your OS style matters. If you are on a Linux or Mac OS, that's a Unix system. Okay, that's a Unix-based system, and you're going to have something that looks like what I already showed you. It's going to be, user. Whoop, it's going to be user. It's going to be your username. Hold on. I don't like how that looks. Let's fix that. It's going to be user, your username, and whatever else you want for your full path. Now, what else is going to happen here is you're going to have basically you have these single slashes, and you have your root starts with that slash, and then you have your user directory. On a Windows machine, that's going to look very different. All right, so Windows is going to look something like this. You're going to have C colon colon, and your slashes are going to go a different direction. Instead of that forward slash, you have that backslash. All right. Actually, I don't know which one's technically forward slash and which one's backslash, but they go the opposite direction of Unix. So you have the C, and you have, maybe you have some folder called data files that you're going to be pulling from, and then you have another slash, and then you have, the rest of your path name here. Now, the problem with Windows, the reason why Windows sucks in terms of doing this in Java is that anytime you use this full path in Java, you're not just going to put C and then colon and then your path like normal. Instead, for every slash, you're going to put in 2 slashes. All right. So what it looks like here is what it looks like. This first one that we talked about. What your file explorer says. All right, that's what your file explorer says. Now, what Java needs, because that slash there is a special character. We need to make sure it shows up. We have to put in those 2 slashes. So this is how Java is going to need it written. So if you're doing an absolute or full path in your Java program and you're running on a Windows machine, you have to do this. Hopefully you don't have to do this too often. You should be able to use relative paths most of the time. But for Windows, if you're ever doing that full path situation or you're using slashes at all, this is really important. You have to put in those 2 slashes, and it's really important that you do that. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is, we're going to come over just a little bit here, is the System.err. So System.err is really useful. It's really important. And the reason for that is anytime we're in a try-catch and we want to print out that message, instead of doing system, it helps if I can spell, doesn't it? System.out. This is bad. Don't do that. Don't do system.out when we're printing out error messages. Instead, do system system.err. And then you can print your message here. So usually we do e.message, right? So that allows us to print out the message. And it's going to print out in fancy red text, and it's going to be indicated that it's an error message. And that can be really useful. The other thing we can do with this is we can do something called system.setErr. And this allows us to put in an output stream. So in here we put an output stream that we've already come up with. This could be like a file. And this means that anytime we use system.err, we're going to put things instead of in the console, which is where system.err normally puts it, it's going to put it into that output stream, which could be a file. It could be some other output stream that we have. Usually it's either console or it's the file. So usually we're going to have one of those. If we're doing system.err, by default, it's going to system.out.println console type situation, right? The system.setErr allows us to change that to a file, which means that we can generate logs, which is really useful for production Java applications, because then you can have logs about how your program is running without cluttering up your console if you're using the console for anything useful. All right. The last thing we're going to talk about in this video is going to be the file class. All right, so the file class is a utility class. It lets us get some information about a file in the Java application. And we just do this very easily. We make a file object. So we're just going to call this my file. Ooh, my file. And we do new file. And then we're going to give it our file name. So file.txt. Now what this is going to do is we can check to see if it exists. We have a couple different methods that we can call against it. Exists, can read. Let's see what else is in here. Those are the 2 big ones, exists and can read. So if it exists and if you're allowed to read it. So that's, again, that's going to be .exists method and the can read method. Now, the other thing that you get to do is that in your output streams, you can use this in place of a file name, right? So if we're doing that new buffered reader or that new um, file input stream, right? We can use this instead of that file name. We can use the file class. We can generate this file. We can check to see all of these things. And we can use this in place of using a file name, and it'll work just the same. It'll work just fine. Examples for how to do that are on page 613 through basically 615 of your book. So that's really useful. I recommend going and looking through that. There's a couple other methods that are really useful about this file class that I recommend checking out, and those methods are listed on pages 615 through 617. So there's just a lot of documentation in the book regarding that. All right, so the next video we're going to talk about binary files, and we're probably going to do 2 more videos. So it's going to be binary files, and it's going to be about printing out objects to text files in order to save them. All right.